I would say more basically, these are classics that have been around for a while that inform my perspective on social issues generally, because I should mention that I have 2 master's degrees, that I call my labor of academic love and my labor of academic pragmatism, but they're interrelated. And my labor of academic love was anthropology, and my labor of academic pragmatism was my degree in librarian information science. And they work together because the library degree gives me certain research skills, and the anthropology degree gives me a kind of interdisciplinary perspective on how all of these issues of culture and society and economy and politics connect. So in that vein, another book I would recommend, which has been around for a while, is by the humanistic Marxist C. Wright Mills, The Sociological Imagination. Because in the Sociological Imagination, he says sociology, and this is very related to anthropology too, sociology and anthropology are very similar. He says that sociology is about connecting private troubles to public issues.
Sounds good.
And that connects right with second wave feminism, where we said that the personal is the political, right? Yes. And so there's an anthropologist who wrote a similar book called The Anthropological Imagination, where she does something similar to what C. Wright Mills does, except that she does it from a related anthropological perspective.
Sounds good.
I'm afraid I can't help STEM students very much, because that's not what my orientation has been.
That's all right. That makes sense. There's definitely plenty. And I mean, it ties in.
But everybody should read, even if you're majoring in STEM, I think you will still find value to these books. Because, the way science is done, the way mathematics is done, engineering, that's all impacted by culture and society.
Yes,
too.
Yeah. I mean, I'm majoring in microbiology, immunology, and molecular genetics. Pretty STEMmy, but it's still very helpful. Yeah, I know. It took me a long time to actually remember all the words in my own major, but I really did. It was like 2 weeks I would be like, I'm studying something I don't remember, and immunology, and I think there's also genetics in there.
I can tell one thing about you. You're a lot better in math than I am.
Thanks. Thank you.
I would flunk calculus 100%. There's no way I'd get through it.
Yeah, that stuff can definitely be very tough, but it's just.
But that's an area where I think the job possibilities are really going to be very open, because there's so much going on in medical research all the time.
Thank you. Yes. Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, it does feel like it's really a lot of possibility in that field. And all this stuff is still just like all this sociology and history is still just as relevant, because you still have to figure out, like, we've had a whole thing recently, we get these vaccines, and now there's a lot of problems over how all these countries which are poor are going to be able to get these vaccines and vaccinate their population, and what do we need, how does our intellectual property work, and is our intellectual property gonna, like, it makes sense to have intellectual property, but it doesn't make sense to have such a rigid concept that it stops people from getting vaccinated and being protected from a disease that kills people, or all the other issues of being able to afford drugs and all these, and how there's effects. I I was reading a report where they were saying it's not even like some of these people, I think it was Goldman Sachs or something, said they don't like cures very much. Because if you cure a disease, you don't profit so much because then people don't have it and you can't sell them any more treatments. So all these economic, sociological questions are just who gets to be in your lab to begin with, and how do you have your lab be a place where you don't have sexual harassment and where anybody can come in and not be pushed out or not even get a chance to get started.
You know, and I know, for example, that Rachel Carson, who wrote Silent Spring, she didn't get a lot of credit for what she was doing at the beginning because of sexism. And that was true for some of the women who worked on DNA research as well, I think.
Yeah, Rosalind Franklin. She is a young Jewish woman she did a lot of the when you're doing microscopes and you have to get them just right, otherwise you won't be able to see what you need to see, so you can figure out what DNA was. And she's the one who made them get it so they could actually figure out what DNA was. And then I think when she was young, she died in her 20s, I think, of ovarian cancer. And these guys who were sexist and anti-Semitic, one of them's been going around saying that Jews cause anti-Semitism and all this stuff, just not respectful, and didn't have any respect for her, so they just said it was all their thingy and just tried to ignore her. And now people are remembering again because someone did the work to find out that this young Jewish woman made it possible for us to know what DNA is.
Exactly.
Yes.
Can we circle back for a minute?
Yeah.
To something that I mentioned before.
Perfect.
Which is that I mentioned an essay by Erich Ward called "Skin in the Game" that I think is very, very essential for understanding what's going on, and why a fascist cult of personality evolved around Donald Trump. The subtitle for that essay is "How Anti-Semitism Animates White Nationalism," which is precisely what I think is going on. And if your listeners go to the website of Political Research Associates, they will find a copy of that essay.
Perfect. Yes. And that's going in the description.
He uses a Twitter handle @BulldogShadow.
Yes.
And he can be followed there. And I just highly recommend that everyone follow his work for understanding the problems that this country is facing now.
Yep. Yeah, he is really, really brilliant and really committed to understanding and shedding light on what's going on.
Right.
Yes.
So I think we're almost at the last question.
Yep. Yep. So the last question is, what kind of feature would you like this amazing world of ours to have, and how can we get there?
I'm going to go backwards and say, in terms of how can we get there, something that I recommend to everyone when they're feeling overwhelmed and when they're saying, what can we do, is to choose one large-scale human rights organization and join. It can be Human Rights Watch, it can be Amnesty International, it can be Equality Now, which focuses on women and girls' human rights issues on a global perspective. The kind of future that I want. I want a future where human rights are truly universal. And in this country, of course, it means an end to police brutality, an end to racist policing. Two other important books that I'll mention in that context that taught me a lot before we end this conversation is Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, and a book by a Black law professor, Paul Butler, called Chokehold. Those have absolutely been essential books for my anti-racist education. So I want a world where human rights are not abused, where there will be less billionaires, but there will be more people who can have their basic needs for food, for clean water, for decent shelter, that those needs will be met, and that there will be a little bit more for human flourishing, for art, for music.
Yes, yes.
In this country, I want this country to live up to the potential of being a multiracial social democracy.
Yes. Thank you. That was amazing.
You're very welcome. I enjoyed it. You're going to send me a copy, right?
Yeah, definitely. I'll send you a copy. I just need like a few minutes to record this thing